labs of major corporations, it's often coming from small groups of makers and entrepreneurs who then go on to either be acquired or to scale up and make their own things. And I'm wondering from Leslie and Zach's point of view, and Richard from you as well, what you're seeing when you look at the kinds of partnerships that are being developed between Chinese entrepreneurs and American entrepreneurs or Bay Area entrepreneurs. What kinds of experiments are you seeing? Because to me, I've been living and working and studying in China for almost 30 years now. And what I think is so exciting about what's happening is there's a new kind of language, a new way of thinking about partnership that we're seeing, not between large companies, but between these smaller groups of makers and entrepreneurs, many of whom are going over to Shenzhen themselves, like probably many of you in the audience, or being supported by Accelerator, being funded by the VCs. So if you could just talk a little bit about those partnerships and where you see those going.
There are two things that you sort of spawned me to think. One is that Spark made a decision early on in our time at Accelerator as the new product, the Spark Core, was sort of coming into our minds. It was coming into being gradually, and we had to make some decisions about the business direction and some things that we couldn't undo, that we needed to take one path or the other early on, and we decided to open source the vast majority of our stack. So our firmware is completely open source. The circuit board design of the Spark Core is completely open source. And we have open source versions of a lot of the cloud software that's more focused on being easy to install rather than the scalability that our service provides. So that decision to go open source really won us a great deal of support from the community, and that enables these kinds of cross-culture participation things too. Anyone from anywhere can participate in making this whole system better. So that's maybe the first thing I think of.
So can I use it Chinese? Okay. 我觉得在中美的这种交流的话，我觉得很重要一点是大家的这种资源和优势的这种共享。然后，其实在中国我们其实见到有很多的民间的科学家，他们其实会做自己的一些潜水艇，会做自己的一些飞船，会做自己的一些飞机等等这样的各种各样的东西。但是呢，他们一直把这个东西当成自己的一个业余的爱好来存在。但是呢，他们从来没考虑过，他们会把这个东西变成自己的一个事业，变成自己的一个生意。然后，在4年前的时候，我们第一次到美国来参加了 Make Fair， 我们觉得这个东西很赞。我们觉得我们中国人其实也是有创意的，只要我们把这个概念引进到中国，让更多人知道这个事情，然后唤醒民众对这个东西的参与，让他们不再对这个生活受到生活压力所迫，而能把自己的爱好同时变成自己的一份事业。我觉得这个是非常非常好的。其实现在呢，越来越多人也加入到中国这个 Maker 这个事业里面，然后呢，觉得找到组织，把自己的这个兴趣逐渐变成了自己的事业。我觉得这是一个很好的一个方式。然后对于美国特别是湾区来说的话，有大量的人才，有大量的创意，但是呢，缺乏的可能是一个针对于这种生产或者供应链的这样一个资源。所以我们也欢迎大家来到深圳，利用我们原来山寨遗留下来的这样一些产业链，来帮助大家把这个创意更好的实现。对于 CS Studio 来说的话，我们其实最大的市场在于美国，所以我相信呢，未来或者说在未来的5年或者10年中，我觉得依然美国会扮演这样一个最重要的一个创新的一个角色。
Yeah, I think from our perspective as investors, the most significant thing about the new generation of perhaps connected devices is these are devices. Right? These are the physical manifestation with electronics in them. And you have to manufacture them somewhere. You will manufacture them at scale, and you have to manufacture them in a cost-effective way. Otherwise, you're not going to meet price point that's interesting to your customers. And that's where the cross-border connection comes in. I mean, Shenzhen, I think, has rightly been described as the factory of the world, certainly in the electronic space, that's the case.
Yeah, and I think also what's so important about the maker movement side of it is that we need the experimentation and creativity to help us figure out what we're going to do with all of these devices. And I mean, we don't know yet. I think that's what's so exciting. Sorry.
All Apple's devices are manufactured.
He's just saying all of Apple's devices are manufactured in China. Yes. Well, I think all of everyone's devices are manufactured in China. I want to open it up to the audience for questions. We probably have time for one or maybe two questions, and I see a hand back here. Do you want to come up and see? I've got the microphone here. Let me bring that over to you. If you could introduce yourself. Thank you.
Tom Rust from Custom Power Solar. Do you see that the growth of 3D printing will shift the way that manufacturing is done in the mobile community?
I think it allows for very rapid prototyping. I think it'd be many years before you can match an industrial process if you want to manufacture hundreds of thousands of millions of the device. If you want to make 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 or 20, 3D printing is an incredibly effective way to go. You don't need to make a mold. You can translate your computer designs directly into physical products, right? But there are limitations to the materials, and there's certainly limitations in the cost and speed at which you can make these things. So I think it's got a place. I think for truly products, once you reach a certain mass and scale, for instance, you're not going to 3D print the chairs they're sitting on. It just won't be cost effective to do that.
我觉得3D打印一定会成为未来制造业的一个补充。我不觉得它一定会替代现在传统的这种模具的生产制造，但是它会成为一个很大的一个补充。这个补充在于这个生产决定生产量。未来的产品呢，很多会是个性化的产品，然后呢，它的生产量不会达到像现在这种大众产品这样一个生产量，所以说它需要一种更灵活的方式，比如像3D打印这种方式来完成这样的一个生产。所以我觉得它是未来。随着这种技术的越来越成熟，它的打印数这些也会越来越快，它会成为一个主流。
Okay, I think we have one more question here, and then I'm going to turn us over to lunch, and if you have other questions, please find us afterwards. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, my name is Matt Sheehan. I'm the China correspondent for the Huffington Post, and I visited Accelerator and places like that. My question is the relationship between the traditional manufacturing sort of infrastructure and the maker movement and stuff like agile manufacturing. Like you said, they've sort of left behind a great factory infrastructure that either when those industries move inland or somewhere else, there's a lot of factory, there's a lot of expertise left over. What's the relationship between that manufacturing system and agile manufacturing, 3D printing and maker movement stuff?
In my experience, anyway, there is we can talk about these things as very isolated, but in fact, the staff that works at these factories and the facilities themselves, there's a lot of overlap, and there's a lot of learning that goes back and forth. I know in working with our manufacturing partners, they teach us a great deal about how to make things at scale using more traditional methods, and often we challenge the ideas that they give us and push them to try some new things that they then appreciate and use with future customers. So I see that there's a lot of flux and a lot of learning and a lot of communication going on between.
Maybe I can draw an analogy for you. If you look at the process of printing a set of materials, whether it's the brochures that ended up today, or book, or cards, right? If you go back 20 or 30 years ago, they were almost all printed on offset printers, right? They're either physical type or offset prints. And then as the laser printers and the inkjet printers got better and cheaper and more cost effective, the volume that you could produce with on-demand printing at a reasonable cost began to increase. There was still a place for traditional printing, offset printing. I mean, if you wanted to print 10 million copies of the New York Times to distribute, you're not going to do on-demand printing. But we've gotten to the stage where you can do a print run of 10 or 20,000 books, right? And certainly a print run of 1,000 books, right? It's much better done with on-demand printer than it is with offset printer because the fixed overhead costs are high. I see the same analogy in larger scale manufacturing. The 3D printing, the rapid prototyping in Asia, those serve a purpose. Those are very, very good when you're small production runs, when you need to refine your product. When you're ready to manufacture millions and millions and millions of them, you still go to a traditional factory.
Yeah. One quick follow-on to that is that the on-demand methods, the rapid prototyping methods like 3D printing and on-demand printing, their influence can't be ignored. They fundamentally reshape what things actually get made at scale because we get to make the mistakes. The cost of making a mistake becomes so low, whereas it used to be, I mean, if you spin up a tool for some injection molded plastic and you messed something up, you just lost a lot of money and a lot of time. So all of these on-demand agile methods help us refine up to a much greater degree than we could before what actually gets made.
Can I just say, I think that's actually a critical question for the future of Chinese manufacturing and American innovation both. I think, it's probably not a surprise that China, which has the largest manufacturing capacity and which is moving so quickly and able to move so quickly, is really pushing the edges of thinking about the relationship between traditional manufacturing and whether that's labor or fixed capital or technology. The relationship between that and agile manufacturing, the whole world of startups, open innovation, I think that's really, when you think from a city and sort of regional development point of view, that'll be important not only for Shenzhen, but for many cities in China, and probably for many cities in other parts of the world as well. So I think it's a great future question to keep in mind. I want to thank our panelists. Can you join me in thanking them, please? And I want to wrap this up by thanking the Shenzhen Municipal Government, the Economic Trade and Information Commission of Shenzhen, the Shenzhen Industrial Design Profession Association, the Consul General of the People's Republic of China, and the City of San Francisco. Shenzhen Flat Panel Display Industry Association, and Seed Studio, and Meng Meng. And so thank you guys so much for joining us, and please stay for lunch. It's here at the back of the room.